And by the way, when I was privileged to spend the day with all the Special Ops, Green Beret, SEAL team guys, there was not one alpha male in the group. Not one. They were just regular guys that knew how to take care of business, basically. But what's the takeaway of our good friend Andrew Carnegie, who this program is really, I give credit to because it's his idea. He didn't call it QLA. And just coincidentally, he lived down the road 30 or 40 miles. And he ultimately came back and built Guthrie Castle, which is about 100 some miles that way, the other way, which I almost bought instead of this place back in the day. What's the takeaway about Mr. Carnegie?
From the people hate success.
But, no, go ahead.
People hate success. So whenever he was getting more successful, people hated him more and found reasons to hate him.
Well, I can relate to that. But now I'm the I'm not the Warren Buffett Santa Claus model, but the people don't like, even people close to you don't like you to become super successful, especially when what they deem overnight. I mean, they come up. It must be drugs. It must be this. It must be that. Okay. Yes.
I was saying just after only 5 years of school, he immediately went to work, but not just regular work, there were 12 hours of work. So right off the bat, as a young child, he was already working like most of us probably don't.
Correct. But that time of history, back in the 1800s, child labor and which was they ultimately came up with laws against child labor. Although there's still some parts of the world, in the African continent, in the deep jungles of South America, where they still have child labor, and they still utilize that. But he's been working since, depending on what story you want to believe, he's either been working since he was 7 or 12. Up in this part of the world, there's two different stories. The one story that you saw in the movie last night, he left here when he was 11 or 12, went to the United States. Another story is here he hid in the belly of a steamship when he was 7 or 8. And he didn't go with his family. That's a story they like to tell here because it's more suffering and, it makes the leap that he made that much greater. I think he left when he was 11 or 12 and he with his father. What else about, yes, sir?
He had something to prove. Like his family was disrespected and he just wanted to come back and just be the top dog.
By God, he is. You can't find anybody 100 years later, which is about now, that has anything bad to say about him. His meanness in this part of the world means cheap. His meanness and ruthlessness has now been turned into philanthropy. But he did give, and he went kind of crazy toward the end of his life, giving his money away. But he had money to give away. And when he took that check from J.P. Morgan for $400 and some million to sell to J.P. Morgan. What else about him? Yes, sir.
My way or the highway.
You like that part, don't you? What else?
He stepped up as a leader when his boss was out of town and the railroad crashed there, and he took initiative. And even though it was he was concerned that he may take flack for it, but still he got ahead and did that.
Also, when his mentor got in trouble, he let him drown, which is pretty consistent. I'm sorry to say. That's one of the attributes, and that's why some of the big guys that I know said that if you were really ruthless, Dan. Now, if they call me not ruthless, and they call me a pussy, what in the fuck are you? What in God's... If I'm a pussy, if I squat to pee, if I'm nothing but a big vagina to some of the guys that we've talked about, which I know, I can't come up with a name to describe you. Not just you, but every group that's ever come through here, with one or two exceptions. They all have a tendency that the guys that help them up when they're drowning to step on the top of their head, which I'm weak. I can't do that part. Or maybe I won't say I can't. I won't. What else about Mr. Carnegie?
Investigate to be competitors.
And it must have been a great time to be alive back in the mid to late 1800s when the Industrial Revolution was going on. And some people say that we're in the fourth revolution, Industrial Revolution. Not industrial, but the cyber revolution. Because it is. I mean, there's new stuff being invented every day. The story that's not told in that film, but when they were trying to join the railroads from the East Coast to the West Coast, and they met in the middle, when they met in the middle about a week or 2 weeks before, they were using different gauge railroad. Coming from the east was like 6 inches high, and coming from the west was 8 inches high. With all the engineering and all the bright guys that existed then, they didn't think of seeing the gauge. So what they had to do is they redid the gauge for about 100 or 200 miles each way. So when it joined, they could join them together. Then they had to rebuild the gauges going out because the gauges didn't match. It was like 10 gauge against 8 gauge or whatever it was. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir.
Back to the mentorship, he sought high performers early on in his career, and he also sought high performers to run his business, like Frick.
Yep. And again, you are who you hang around with. I think that that was before chilling was invented. And it was, the Wild West, and he, in essence, created the steel industry, and he, and all those guys worked like dogs, and the same thing. What else about? Yes, sir.
He wasn't afraid to step up, take risks and responsibility, even when it wasn't his domain.
He stepped up, and when we're going to talk about, the different styles of leadership here. That we've talked about, the one guy on there that's a alpha male is President Trump, and he stepped up, and he followed the same precepts. I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt, et cetera, and through history, these guys and a few gals, not many gals back in those days, all did the same thing. They took accountability, which one of you alluded to already, and they measured. What gets measured gets accomplished. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir.
You learn from his fathers that pushed out the Industrial Revolution. You learn about change. So when the change opportunity came in America to go from iron to steel, you obviously grabbed it with both hands and knew that the technological progression was key, and just kept doing it, kept investing, kept improving, and just drove it around.
The little house that he was born in, which is like not like is a museum now. And they fixed it up. It's quite remarkable. Of course, I've been to Gandhi's house in India, and I've been to a lot of these guys' houses that allegedly Abraham Lincoln's log cabin, which had to be changed, but they're going to talk nice about you 100 years from now, for those of you that achieve the most success. But 5 years from now, you're going to be assholes. And the faster you are successful, maybe I'm hoping some of you are assholes in 5 months, but you don't have to wait 5 years. And not dissimilar to myself. I'm an overnight success after 50 years. When I was fortunate enough to be on the London Real Show, and Brian Rose more or less discovered me. But I shoved myself on that show. I forced him, I shamed Brian Rose into having me on that show. Otherwise, I would have never got on that show. I didn't have to work as hard to get on Joe Rogan's show, but and some of the other shows that I haven't been, it's because I'm too controversial, because they're afraid what I might say, or in fact do. Somebody else had a comment? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say, he was a ruthless manipulator and opportunist, despite...
Are you talking about me or him?
Him, and maybe you. Despite his early hardships, his actions and decisions had no empathy or sympathy for those in similar situations.
Amen. I don't suffer, and I say suffer from empathy or sympathy. I don't feel your pain. Even if you're bleeding out, I don't feel it. I feel no rush to stop you bleeding out. I just don't have it. It's not there. Whereas most of you, mostly because of your mums and sometimes your dads, you feel a need to step forward. Now, if I see some lady getting beat up although I haven't been on a train in years, I step forward, not because I have empathy for her. It's because I have disdain for the asshole beating her up. I don't really care if she gets her teeth knocked out. That doesn't bother me. But, the asshole that's putting the whooping on her, So I react many times for a different reason. Yes, sir.
So I noticed you had Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, about negotiation. I don't suppose, have you read it?
No. It's a gift from one of you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, why I bring it up is amazing book, right? The guy's an FBI negotiator. And so he's, never split the difference. You either, with negotiation, you win or you die, right?
Correct.
And his approach, though, is somewhat empathetic. Because in terms of rather than positioning yourself as in an adversarial position, it's like, we're on the same team.
Yeah, but you can act like you got empathy and not have empathy. That's different. I mean, yeah, that's manipulation. I know how to do that, but I mean, I certainly don't. I just as soon even drop dead on the table right in front of me, and they bring in another negotiator. And you've got to realize that the powers that be now that are trying to rewrite history, rewrite their legacies, that have started these big companies. It's just all of a sudden when they got to be worth $25 billion and they got 60 years old, all of a sudden their personalities changed. They are acting as if they have sympathy. They are acting, in most cases, as if they have empathy. I don't know any of the guys that we've talked about that had sympathy and empathy when they were teenagers, in their early 20s, when they were in school. I don't know any of them. My experience is they didn't. In fact, they were the opposite. Like when I did some of those not so nice things, when I broke that kid's arm in 4 or 5 or 6 or actually 8 places, on purpose. I didn't feel I didn't lose any sleep. And I told you the only time I've ever lost any sleep about any of the outrageous shit I've done is when I almost I blinded that kid. And I've done a lot of shit that I should have lost sleep over. But I lost sleep last night, excited about my $30 billion deal guy. Now I lost sleep over that. Fuck, I was all excited. I couldn't get to sleep. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir.
He said he'll work for 2 more years, but he worked for 30 more years. High performance.
I know that feeling. Yeah.
Either you're full on or you.
Yeah, I was going to work till 2000 and 2005, and here it is, almost 2020. Yeah, I know that. But it's not work to them. See, if you love, that's why I say you don't have to love one of the industries you pick, but if you have some sort of passion for it, it's a lot easier to drive yourself. And it's a lot easier when they tell you you're crazy, why are you doing this? Like when Simon Bell was saying, people are saying, why don't you get a job? Why are you listening to that crazy Peña? Blah, 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 blah. It's a lot easier when you're at least somewhat passionate over it. And if you're fortunate enough to actually love it, then, I mean, it's just water off a duck's back. You don't pay any attention to the naysayers. And even though intellectually we all know we shouldn't listen to the naysayers, the new modern word is haters. The haters, that have hateful comments to make. But day after day, hour after hour, you get haters talking about you. You start to question if you don't love what you do. Like, I don't consider the 50 or 60 hours a week that I still put in, 2/3 of it's pro bono, 2/3 of it's for free. I don't consider that work. Occasionally, when I get asked the same fucking question by you guys for the fifth time in 2 hours, I mean, Bruce Whipple sent me an email yesterday. He said, listening to the YouTubes, he says, I take my hat off that you've done this 26 years. You know how many times I've been asked, where's the equity come from? It's not 1 million. That'd be an exaggeration. But it's got to be 200,000-300,000. You know how many times I've been asked by you, even though I've told you about meetings, right? And you always start the sentence, but. As soon as I see the but, you've got a reason why you should have a meeting before you've got anything to talk about. Even though I've told you a majority of the time it's because you're on your way out. They put banana peels in front of you to make sure you slip. And some of you will ask that question. You know how many times I've been asked, when can I take out money? But I say, but because you're here to get wealthy. A few of you have wealth, some wealth. And so you ask questions that you think that are synonymous with some sort of program to get wealthy. When the most important thing that you can ever learn coming out of here is how to define and categorize a motivated seller as quickly as humanly possible. That's it. And again, I bring it back to sex. It's easy. The girl next door with her window open is better than the girl across town that you got to climb through the chimney. I mean, I can't make it any more graphic than that. Anything else about? Yes, sir.
The ability to foresee new things and how are they going to change, because he's very immersed in the fields that he's doing.
Well, Mr. Carnegie was at the forefront. And when you're in the eye of the tiger, you don't know you're in the eye of the tiger. You only know you're in the eye of the tiger when you look back in hindsight. And he got very philosophical in his old age. As you do, I mean, they call it maturity, but as you get older, even when you're hard, and I consider myself a hard guy, you soften up. You soften up. Some of the kids that went to the seminar in the 90s, they came back in 2010-ish. They thought I was a different person from 94 to 2010. Yet, the seminar is a lot better in 2010 than it was in 94, 95, 96. I don't perceive myself when I look in the mirror. Well, I see I got more gray hair now, but I don't perceive myself as being softer, but I obviously was. Okay, YouTube, bye-bye.